Cyril Ramaphosa, the President of South Africa, to deliver his speech. Your Excellency, sir.
Your Excellency, dear brother, President Mnangagwa, Your Excellency, heads of state and government, and former heads of state.
Hello, hello. Comrades, can we allow His Excellency to deliver his speech? Comrades,
iti kune munhu wakagara naye imbonyarara uti shh. Ngatinyararei. Thank you very much. Lingabantu abahle, kasithuleni.
On behalf of the people of South Africa, I'd like to express my profound condolences to the Mugabe family, to ZANU-PF, and to the people of Zimbabwe.
Because acts of such brutality, let's start again. I made a mistake there. Should I go? Because acts of such brutality, let's start again. I made a mistake there. Should I go?
Yeah, it's been bad. It's been terrible for the Ramaphosa. The 100 days have really been a pain in the PR stakes. I'm joined by Professor Kealeboga Maphunye, as well as Lorato Tshenkeng, a professor from the University of South Africa. Lorato is the MD of Decode, a reputation management agency. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Thank you, JJ. Good evening.
It's been a long way since the IEC, man.
Indeed.
Thank you for joining us again. Prof, let me start with you. I mean, what's your interpretation of what is happening in response to the xenophobic violence now? Do you think that there's a new wave of response which is different from how such violence has been dealt with before? Or is maybe that we ignored it in the past when African countries or citizens from other countries responded or reacted in a manner that we saw there at the funeral of the Robert Mugabe?
My view is that we see more of the same. There hasn't been significant difference from the way we reacted, let's say, between 2000 and 2008. Remember, we had that flare-up. And what is happening now? I think it's more or less the same response. But I also look at it differently in a sense that for me, I don't see xenophobia as it is tagged xenophobia. I see Afrophobia. If you remember, I once mentioned in this platform that in my view, it is more of an Afrophobia. Yes, there are Pakistanis, there are Afghanis, there are people from Bangladesh, but they are very few and far between. The majority of them are people from neighboring countries and even as far afield as the likes of Malawi, Tanzania, and so on. So in my view, we see more of the same approach. And for as long as we overlook, I hear much talk about the fact that these attacks are criminal activities. But when you are down on the ground, in those taxis, in the townships, in the nooks and crannies of this country, you hear people talking differently. There is a certain element of hatred that we should not overlook, in my view.
And is this in your view, giving then the country a bad image overall? Just now asking whether it's different, is that, we've had our, a friendly match with Bafana cancelled. We have, embassies threatening to pull out the ambassadors. We've got South African businesses having to shut down in Nigeria and so on. Clearly, there is action that is as a response to what those countries or their citizens perceive to be happening here. Do you think it is too few incidents to conclude that it is damaging the brand of the country?
Brand South Africa, in my view, has experienced heavy battering in the past few days. By the very same few incidents that you are talking about, there are few, but they have a significant impact internationally. Hence, some countries will withdraw their football teams from coming to play with Bafana, and goodness knows, who else would be excluded. Mañana, the under 20s and so on. We don't know, but the impact, in my view, is just too heavy, and that toll on brand South Africa is sometimes very difficult to quantify, because remember, we are also trying to ensure that the economic growth of the country should not dwindle, should not go down. The rent must not go down. We have been doing all the things that we thought, with the new elections that have just come up in May 2019, there's going to be an effective turnaround. But if suddenly you have the country being tarnished by such negative images, this affects us not only in the region, in the SADC region, it affects us continentally, it also affects us globally. Right now the president did not go to to attend the UN General Assembly. Some argue that is because he felt that he needed to address domestic issues. And what are these domestic issues? In my view, that is the so-called xenophobic violence, including what you were speaking about earlier before we came onto the show, this so-called gender-based violence. In my view, I call it men attacking women and killing them. So that's what it should be called. If you say gender-based violence, like you are addressing it in a nice, cushy, it sounds nice,
All right.
quote unquote.
Let's pause there, because I want us to focus on how, in your view, how do you assess the response of government to the current wave of gender-based violence? But let's get to the brand first. Lorato, what's your assessment of how the brand has been affected, especially in these first 100 days of Ramaphosa? You remember 18 months ago, there was this whole issue of Ramaphoria. In a sense, the whole country was relieved that it is Ramaphosa who made it to be president of the ANC and therefore president of the country subsequently. And the euphoria, in a sense, right, seems to have tapered down. And as soon as he then was formally president, there seems to have been a southwards movement on all kinds of things. We've just seen there in the clip earlier what happened even when he was addressing a big issue like gender-based violence. We've seen the booing in Zimbabwe and so on. Give me your summation of how you see things from a brand perspective, the brand of Ramaphosa as such.
Thank you, JJ. And I guess one of the most important things is to acknowledge that President Cyril Ramaphosa's election was almost giving a glimmer of hope to many South Africans. So go back to March 2019. There's a barometer called the Edelman Trust Barometer. Edelman is one of the largest PR agencies. They have an annual barometer that they run, and they indicated that it has never been that in 5 years the South African government has been trusted, and they attributed that upsurge in trust on the so-called Ramaphoria, right? So meaning the president, or at least President Ramaphosa's, the many things that he did. Take, for instance, when he was elected, when he became president in February in 2018, he did a number of things. One, there was an investment summit, there was a job summit, although he was pushed into a corner to have the gender-based violence and femicide summit. So there were many things that he did. So in a typical, or in a true PR style, he did what you expect somebody to do that. And we always say that there's that PR is not what you say, but what you do. Fast forward to March, or at least May 25, 2019, right? The president is elected into power. Of course, we know that the economy is not doing well. The numbers are not looking good. In June, the jobs are at an all-time 29% in terms of unemployment and all of that. The response from government has been somewhat lethargic, right? Look at ordinarily, without taking anything away from the spokesperson of the president, Kusela Diko. Yeah. She has literally been there just to make announcements. We've known the spokesperson in the office of the presidency to be a person that talks to policy, or at least there would be certain people who champion policy issues. But look around, from a messaging point of view, that is evidently missing. And so if you look at the presidency of President Cyril Ramaphosa, at least since March or May 25, they have under-communicated. In fact, in certain instances, they've literally buried their heads in the sand, which has not done brand South Africa Incorporated any good.
Yeah. I don't know whether, Prof, you can come in there, whether you agree with Lorato, because if you look at, let's say, the crisis that hit the president was the report, the funding, CR17, etc., etc. If you look at how President Zuma would have communicated that type of thing, it would have taken 3 months to even come and say anything. So here was a president who then, on Sunday, this report was released on Friday, on Sunday they were already there saying this is what's going to happen and so on. I thought that was a little bit of a change of, or a breath of fresh air from a point of view of what can be called rapid response.
I think you give the president too much credit, JJ. On any given day, yes, any human being responds better when a doctor tells him that his health is in trouble, or when a lawyer tells him that he needs to respond, right? Let's move away from that and look at the Uyinene incident. How long did it take for the president to respond, right? Because it was not threatening him, it was not life-threatening to him. So in my view, he did a typical thing where ordinarily there was little at stake that was pointing to him. And with regards to that legal matter, there was everything was at stake, and hence that need for that rapid response. So I honestly think that you give the president too much credit in that regard, because if you were to look at facts and many other incidences and say, has that rapid response been the norm? Yeah. Of course not.
Yeah, all right. Prof, do you agree with that assessment?
I look at it slightly differently. 100 days in office for a politician, yeah, is rather too short a period to be able to really make sense of
any assessment.
Where the wind is blowing towards.
Yeah.
Ramaphoria, yes. Maybe Ramapessimism. Because initially we thought people are, euphoric about Ramaphosa.
Yeah.
But then there's this pessimism that kept on, rearing its ugly head, where people say, but will he, do the right thing? By the way, he was the deputy of the very same person that we have just condemned to say, 9 wasted years. Remember that
yes.
That
please, let's pause it there. I want to deal with this issue in the context of what I asked you earlier about whether there's a difference in response. Because if you look at now the current decision about sending envoys, the other president didn't bother. In 2008, Mbeki didn't bother sending any envoy. In fact, Mbeki says, there's no xenophobia. It's recent as 2 or 3 years ago. He was reiterating that. So I want to just analyze that for me a little bit more. But let's take a break now. We're talking now brand South Africa and also the brand of Cyril Ramaphosa in the context of the violence that's been happening, the xenophobia, Afrophobia, no matter however you want to describe it. Let's take a break now. right, welcome back to Your View with me, Nkgopotse JJ Tabane. Our newsmaker tonight, President Cyril Ramaphosa, was booed by a half an empty stadium in Zimbabwe, right, during the funeral of President Robert Mugabe. And the question is whether or not there is a difference in how he's going to handle this xenophobic and Afrophobic thing. Will you pick up where we left off there, Prof? Do you think he's saying I'm giving him too much credit, but let me give him another credit again. Sending envoys to go and say, listen, guys, we're sorry, etc. Is that the right thing to do? I got a very irate caller during the day who called me from my village saying, I don't understand why the president is apologizing. These people are bothering us. They have now, in my village in Hebron, there is a place called Moseja. Apparently, they have renamed the place Lagos. But these people, apparently the land has been sold to them by crooked chiefs. And this person was specifically saying, why are we apologizing? They must go. You understand? So there is, as you correctly pointed out, when you walk the streets, you do have this sentiment. And then you hear the president saying, South Africans are not xenophobic. As a blanket statement that may suggest that he is detached.
The idea, in my view, of the response, however lukewarm we might think it is, in my view, three-pronged. Firstly, the idea is to go back to the African continent. Remember, South Africa has been having this moral high ground since 1994, whereby it could be counted among the likes of Nigeria as the economic and political giants of Africa. To be able to give direction at the African Union in Addis Ababa, and when they speak, there was always this authority that one could count on in terms of NEPAD, the African peer review mechanism, direction.
Yeah.
So recently, because of such attacks, South Africa has increasingly, in my view, been losing that moral high ground. So you lack that authority. So I think the first idea is to reclaim that by going to a few, African countries who are seemingly losing the trust that my colleague was talking about in terms of the South African government. The second one is now dealing with the domestic situation, which in my view is not being dealt with very well, because some of those people that I was alluding to, those ones who believe that they don't want foreigners, as they put it, I think the message is not getting directly to them. Yeah, because they still believe, like in your village, that you have people here, they don't have documents, who brought them in here, corrupt, some elements, corrupt elements of the police, of the immigrations and so on, and they are not being dealt with. So the jury is still out there as to the effectiveness of the domestic part. The last one is now the moral, in terms of appealing to ordinary citizens to say, but realistically, whether somebody is a foreigner or is not a foreigner, why do you kill a person? To burn the person down? I mean, in terms of your own humanitarian grounds. Let alone the fact that South Africans, your nationals are being brutalized in South Africa.
You're not sorting them.
It's because they run away from you in the first place. But it is the so-called quiet diplomacy that you and I might not be able to hear. So I believe that they will also be sending a message to Lagos, to everywhere, to Nairobi, to all these places where we normally go, to say, please don't take ShopRite checkers and all those things, retribution, because you are worsening the situation. Because we saw those revenge attacks.
Yeah, Lorato, is there a way to salvage the brand damage? And do you think that the appointment of envoys to go around the continent is a step in that direction, or you think it's not going to work?
JJ, there definitely is some hope and again, typically with diplomatic relations, you need an action like envoys who are then going to be sent out to do that kind of diplomatic work, right? But most importantly, JJ, South Africans are complaining about their own lived experiences. Own lived experiences is that in the communities where they live, there are drugs. They see a whole lot of other things that they do not want to tolerate. And unless we see the strengthening of the domestic part of things, we are likely to be here again in 2 years' time or in another era. So the fact that there are envoys who've been sent out to other parts of, or at least part of the continent, is a good decision. But the most important thing is that if South Africans complain about drugs and Jabu Baloyi dies at the hands of somebody who's said to be a Nigerian, and because he was calling out people who were selling drugs to young people, and that continues, the likelihood is that we will continue to struggle with this kind of, Prof calls it Afrophobia. I think it's literally, violence against human beings. Because if you consider that apparently out of the 12 people that died, 10 of them are South Africans.
Yeah.
Do we still call it Afrophobia or xenophobia? In that same week when there were attacks on foreign nationals, where I live, people attacked a mall. Do you call that, and where there are no foreign shops that are there, and there were many other areas that were, so there's a lot of criminal element that is there, that the criminal justice system, and particularly the police, are not doing their work to the extent that we're expecting them
So
to.
clearly a combination of things, but from a branding perspective, right? And I want both of you to try and answer this one. What's your assessment of the response? Let's start with gender-based violence. What do you think that the president rose to the occasion from a point of view now of the actions he announced when he addressed the nation last week?
To an extent, he did. And I'm saying to an extent because if you recall, there was a declaration out of the National Summit last year in October or in November, and the expectation was that because there was a committee that was put together, there should have been actions, right? And what we heard from him, at least from a funding point of view, we heard that there is going to be a budget that is allocated. So there's almost not quantifiable things where you are able to say that, is it going to be 1 rand or is it going to be 20 rands? And because then that talks to how are you going to stretch that 20 rands if it is 20 rands?
And then quickly on the xenophobia, do you think it was a good thing to apologize in that stadium?
No, absolutely. It was quite presidential. It is very important for any president, for that matter, when there are issues of violence like we've experienced in South Africa, that when you have an opportunity like that, I believe that the president rose to the occasion in that regard.
Do you think that it was a knee-jerk reaction because he was booed, or it was written into his speech, Prof? Let's speculate there because we don't know.
Yeah, I think it was the Ramaphosa, the diplomat, speaking. Because remember, he has got a very critical negotiation skills.
Yeah.
I think he read the situation. It might not have been in the speech, but when people start booing, you then calculate, look, let me humble myself. So I think it was a very strategic move, which obviously brought us some kind of relief from the continent to say, okay, but at least the president understands our head.
He humbled himself. So it's likely that he read the situation, and that's why, in fact, the response of the crowd sort of changed towards the end.
Absolutely. And by the way, like I keep saying, in the world of diplomacy, there are all these other things that are normally not said in public. You remember the tired slogan, what is this, loud diplomacy, something we used to use there, something like
megaphone.
Or megaphone diplomacy. Diplomacy by its nature actually is not loud. You go behind the scenes and you address very difficult issues. And when you come out, you say, no, we have come to an agreement that there are no difficulties, there are no differences. And yet there are. So the idea was really just to make sure that he appeals to the conscience of the Africans in Zimbabwe and, of course, across the continent. Whether those few envoys will do the work, we don't know, because there are 56 countries in Africa, JJ. And now, my last count when I saw the envoys, there are about 8 or 9. I think they are less than 10.
So they've cherry-picked
specific.
some key...
Absolutely.
Okay. In closing, 1 or 2 issues that will be advised to the president to claw back on the public relations stakes, Lorato?
1, there must be a coherent communication strategy, JJ. There seems to not be a communication strategy that is employed by the presidency, let alone GCIS by itself, right? Secondly, they need to strengthen the spokesperson of government to continue to speak, even if when the president is not speaking, but convey the message of the president. Because when there are information gaps, people speculate, and when people speculate, then there's almost pandemonium of some sort. Lastly, JJ, and this is quite important, the president needs to literally work on his rapid response strategy, because when